Okay. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. Um, so here we are. Taher Libenu. We're purifying our hearts. Being here. This started right after Pesach. Counting 49 days. That's our tradition. We get out of Egypt. We count 49 days. The only time in Judaism where we actually, count the days, up counting for something like that. So we counting, that's the 7 weeks, 7 days times seven. We get to the 49 days. That's what I always have a practice of how I count, so I remember and make it a little practice. And I love doing art. In past years, I've done, painting. This year I did haikus. So I did a little haiku every day for 49 days, which is a really wonderful, because it's really short, and I usually compose it while I was walking the dog, and it brings you into the moment. It brings me into the moment, which any kind of art will do. And it's a little bit, when you're in the moment and you're just opening your eyes to the world, it's a little bit of revelation. And we're preparing ourselves for 49 days. We're preparing ourselves for this, the 50th day, which is called, in the Torah, it's called Atzeret, which is after you've finished a cycle of 7, you finish the cycle, but you don't stop there. You have another day of gathering and resting. And so this is the 50th, like we said, it's like the Jubilee. We have those 7 years of the Shemitah years, and then you have the 50th year, which is the Jubilee. So this is that cycle of the just why we have seven days of the week. This is 7 weeks. After 7 weeks, this is the only holiday in the Torah that doesn't have its own date. It never says, on this day of this month you will have Shavuot. It just says count 7 weeks, 7 days, 7 weeks from the day after Pesach. And that will be the Atzeret. That will be the time when you're going to gather and get together. And the Torah and the rabbis put this together, that this would be the time. This is the time when we receive the Torah, that we get to Mount Sinai. And the point that if you see always arriving at Sinai, from the tradition that as we've talked about all night, the tradition that we're in, the mystical Hasidic or neo-Hasidic tradition, says that this was not something that happened 3,000 years ago. This is something that is happening all the time, if we are open to it. And that's a quote. There's a quote from the Maggid of Mezrich, which I was looking around and I couldn't find actually, so I found a place to somebody who quoted from the quote. But we get the idea. This was from the Maggid, who got it from the Baal Shem, that the words of Sinai are always there. They're always like ringing out. It's like the radio waves coming out, and they're always there. And if we're able to tune into them, we're able to stand at Sinai. And that's where we are. So this is what we're trying to open our hearts to, Taher Libenu, purify our hearts. What does it mean? What does it mean in our age, in our day, in our own lives to receive the Torah? What does that mean? What does it mean to you? I'm going to put this a little bit in, again, sort of we've talked about Reb Zalman. So if you see there's like this, the next thing in this like picture, which is, this is a picture from the latest moon adventure. But Reb Zalman was very influenced by when this first came out in the in the early 70s, and the Whole Earth catalog had this picture on its front, and when this picture was for Reb Zalman, as I understand it, a sign of a paradigm shift. This is a sign. It's like we get to look at the earth from the outside, from looking at it not from our little individual point of view where we think about like, well, my town is better than that and my country is better than this and I'm better. It's like, no, we are part of this beautiful jewel of a planet that's out in space, and we are all here. And it's a living, if you can, it's nicer in color, but you get the idea that this is a living organism. And Reb Zalman was very much into the idea of Gaia and Gaia consciousness. Gaia was the theory that came out that said the planet Earth, Gaia in the Greek, is a living organism. And I love this, and this was a very big thing for Reb Zalman, because for him it was one of the parts of the paradigm shift that we're living in. And a paradigm shift, this is another word that Reb Zalman loved to talk about. He loved to talk about Gaian consciousness, the fact that we are all like neurons in the brain of Gaia. We are all cells in this organism. We are all the people, all the individuals, and all of the nations and all of the peoples are like, sometimes he would say parts in instruments in the orchestra. Sometimes they're organs of the body. All of these, but it's always an organic. Nobody's just the same as anybody else, but we're all together and working together, and we're all connected. And for him, this was a huge paradigm shift. Paradigm shift is the language that was put out, and I'm blanking on the year, that in science, the Thomas Kuhn, who was a philosopher of science, said that like scientific revolutions, that you go along, you're in a paradigm, and everybody's just kind of like adding another brick to the building. And we just thought another thing, and that's great way you build up the knowledge and things like this. And when somebody gets like a crazy idea, they usually don't graduate, or they don't get their paper published, or that, because it's like that's not part of the paradigm until the problems with that paradigm start to build up, and more people start to listen to these guys who were rejected. And then at a certain point, you see the paradigm shifting. And we are in a time of paradigm shift. We're not the first. There's been a few of them. So I was at dinner. We had a wonderful dinner with Rabbi Jonathan and Ellen and my wife Ilana. And Ilana is a acupuncturist. And Jonathan brought up this article that he was like, I think the fourth or fifth person who was going to wanted to send this article that came up in the New York Times. Everybody saw this article about like discoveries connecting the east to the west to the east. People saw this article, yes, and so many people saw it, and I saw it and I sent it to her, and she said, well, yeah, the two other people also sent it to me, because, people are like, what is going on here? What was the point of this article in general? It was like, we in this West, in our Western medical science, have been treating all of these organs as separate, and you've got your skin here, and you've got your organs there, and you've got this thing called the fascia, which is this sort of thing that's it's just a little fascia, it's fine, doesn't. And then the latest thing that they were writing about says no, the fascia is actually really doing stuff. It's really bringing information and materials and things all over the body, and it's connecting the body just the way Chinese medical tradition has been saying for thousands of years, that the body is a system that works all together. So you could put a needle in my toe and it's going to affect my lung or whatever is going on. And that's a paradigm shift that we're still, and it's always, people are still surprised. Wow. They're not surprised here, you all get it, but the people writing in the New York Times, there's this and this, wow, we were wrong all along. It's actually really connected. We really are connected. I was reading also in the New York Times, a few days ago, the coming water crisis. Did you ever say what was it called? But the next water crisis that's coming, and they're talking about in the West, in the Southwest, where there's ponderosa pines, and all of these ponderosa pines, and they're dying, and there's not, they're not getting enough water, and there's drought, but there's also really bad forestry practices where they would like any fire that came up, they would like immediately put it out, not realizing that in fact fires are part of the ecosystem and that you need that to thin out the brush, otherwise you can have really big fires. And the fact that the trees are disappearing from these places in the Southwest is not just like, oh, they're nice trees, like we like to look at the trees. No, the trees bring shade, which allows the snow melt to actually not evaporate, but actually go into the rivers so that we can actually have waters to drink. And so because of the trees are missing, we're going to have a crisis of water. And I learned that a few years ago. It's like, we've got a lot of water in the ocean. The water has to have some way to get into like 300, 400, 500 miles into land. If it wasn't for forests, the water would never be able to get to the middle of the continent. Everything is connected. And we have been in a paradigm for the last couple hundred years, 200-300 years, of modern science that has said we can best understand the world by breaking things down and treating the world as a machine. And we can best live our lives if we can actually just make it as individuals and break with traditions and break with families. And so we've been living in a world of individualism and reductionism. And that's also a paradigm which is starting to shift. So part of what we're talking about here today is what's Torah in a shifting, in a new paradigm that we're starting to inhabit, a paradigm of connectedness, a paradigm of where we understand that everything is connected. Let's go on a little bit. So I brought some of these traditional sources, and I wanted to bring this. This is from the Talmud. It's from the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat, and it's a famous for the 5 people who read this stuff, but famous midrash on the giving of the Torah. And if we want to read it, let's see if we want to just paraphrase it. But so this is right after, so it's right after the picture. Then you have Shabbat 88a. Let me just read it. The Gemara cites an additional homiletic, blah, 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 blah. Moses brought the people forth out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the mountain, at the lowermost part of the mountain. Now, it's not always great to look for, because you don't know what's going on. What do you mean the lowermost part of the mountain? It says in the Hebrew, V'yityatzvu b'tachtit hahar. They stood at the bottom of the mountain, but tachtit hahar. Tachtit hahar means the bottom of the mountain, and that's correct, the lowermost part of the mountain. But it could also be understood as under the mountain. And that's where the rabbis started to play with this. Well, okay, maybe it wasn't at the bottom of the mountain. Maybe it really is under the mountain. So that's the kind of thing that they did. They play with these things. So Rabbi Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa said the Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain. And the verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, overturned the mountain above them like a tub and said to them, if you accept the Torah, excellent. And if not, there will be your burial. That is to say, where you're standing. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, from here, there is a substantial caveat to the obligation to fulfill the Torah. What is it? This is like, it's actually a technical term, meaning that it's like there's a problem with your contract here. This is like they borrow this term from like Talmudic contract law, and they said like, wait a second, we understood that the Jews entered into a binding covenant at Mount Sinai. And it's binding not only on them, but it's a covenant, it's a brit, it's a contract that's binding upon them and and all the generations afterwards. But he says, like, hold on a second. There's a problem with this contract. If God was holding the mountain over their heads and saying, like, you're going to get buried if you don't accept the Torah, that's coercion, and a coerced contract doesn't count. So that's the problem here. What's going on? Are they saying that the contract at Mount Sinai doesn't count? It's all in that one technique, Moda'a Rabbah L'Oraita. That's all. That's why, this is a Sefaria translation. They have like the bolded words are the actual words from the Talmud, and then you have all the non-bolded words are like all the things you need to explain what those words mean. Because they have those two words, three words, Moda'a Rabbah L'Oraita is a technical term saying this is a big problem with that contract. That's pretty common that they pack a lot of stuff in a few words. Amar Rava, so Rava Achar Bar Yaakov said, Rava said, even so, don't worry, we're okay, don't worry. They again accepted it willingly in the time of Achashverosh. As it is written, the Jews ordained and took upon themselves. Kimu v'kiblu. They got up and they accepted it. And upon their seed and upon all such as joined them, and and the Jews ordained what had already been accepted. So because it had this line in the book of Esther, in the scroll of Esther, it says, Kimu v'kiblu. Why did it have to repeat? They fulfilled it and then they accepted it? Like, why? We could have just said one or the other. Why did you say both? Well, they accepted what they had already accepted before. But, so that's all fine. Why? What's going on here? What is the book of Esther and Achashverosh and all, what does that have to do with Mount Sinai? Why then and not some other? Was it just some random thing that they found those verses in the book? I don't think so. I think it was a paradigm shift. Right? So we're talking about this, there were paradigm shifts that we're in, and there are paradigm shifts. So there was a paradigm shift between the way things were in the biblical days, in the days of the first temple, and that paradigm started to shift already in the time of Esther and Mordechai, and by the time you got to the rabbis, there was a big paradigm shift. So let's take a look at this again. What does it mean? This is a great story. The mountain was over their head. What does it mean to you that, why would they make up the story about, like, okay, it says the verse under the mountain. What does it mean? Why would we think that the mountain is being held over their head and that this is like, you accept the Torah, great. If not, this is your grave. What would it mean? The standing at Mount Sinai. Why would that be such a situation where God is holding that mountain over their head, or else? Why would they create that story? What does that story mean? How would you interpret that story? What does it mean about how they thought about revelation at Mount Sinai? Yeah. Right. There are not a lot of alternatives. Yeah.
That's like, okay, I got you out of Egypt. Now you are going to do what I say, or else. I mean, talk about coercion. It's like there's no choice anymore. So you don't have a choice to accept Torah.
Right. You're out there with this. You've accepted this. Hitchhiking out here, and now there's no place. Nobody else going to save you. That's also possible. Yeah. There's not a lot of choice there. But so there's a lot of things the way I've understood this is that if God actually appeared to you and really, like, what does that mean? If God actually appeared to you and says, like, here, I'm going to give you my wisdom, are you going to accept it? I don't think there would be a lot of choice in the matter. On some level, I think there would be, like, if you are given like such a clear revelation, and that the Mount Sinai revelation was such a clear revelation that it was just like prophecy, like everybody got prophecy, how would you refuse that? What even part of you would be there to refuse that? There would be so much, it would be so obvious to you. That's how I am. It's like it would be so obvious to you that this is the reality. What would and this was the world of prophecy. On some level, this was Mount Sinai. This was the biblical world of like, how could you refuse him if it's like shown to you in complete revelation? Lisa.
It could also be on another level from just the physical, a mountain will come crashing. But if revelation, if the thing comes that says this is truth and you don't take it, it becomes a soul death. Because
Right.
how do you live when you don't accept that? So
Right.
one could take it on another octave.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole collection of these stories about Mount Sinai. If you go there to Tractate Shabbat 88, there's another story which says like when they heard God speak at Mount Sinai, their soul left them. And then the angels came down and gave them their soul back. And all of these stories. So it's like, it's that kind of revelation is like where you're basically it's like, how can you even continue on as the same human being once you've had that kind of revelation? And on some level, so that's the biblical, that's the revelation at Sinai. And in some ways you can see that as maybe kind of standing for that whole first temple period where they were following these prophets who had these kind of revelations. Then you get to Purim and Esther and Mordechai, and it's really like, what's unique about the book of the scroll of Esther in the whole Torah, in our written book of Torah? There's a unique thing about the book.
No God.
No God, right? There's no mention of God. And it's also, it got into the book, it made the cut, but nobody ever claimed that Esther, when she wrote that letter to the people, and Mordecai, when they wrote that letter, nobody ever claimed that they were prophets. They're just Jews who said, guess what? We're going to create this holiday. God never told us about holiday. It's not like Pesach. It's not like, Sukkot. There's going to be a new holiday. All the Jews for every year from now on, everywhere over the world, we're all going to do this holiday, and we're agreeing to it. We're putting this into the Torah. That's a very new kind of thing happening. Like, that's the first time that ever happened, that the Jewish people said, we're adding to the Torah. So I once learned it's kind of like if you're like invited by your friend to go to like some committee meeting. He said, I don't want to go to a committee meeting. I was like, no, I don't have time for this. I was like, no, just come to the committee, come. So you come to the committee meeting and you're here and they're discussing and then you get excited about it and you say like, wait a minute, I think we should do it like this. So you've joined the committee. So once you add on to something, you put your contribution into something, you, by definition, have joined that committee. So when the Jews say, we're going to just add this little bit to the Torah, we're going to add this holiday, we're going to put this little scroll in, they're saying, we like this project, we're going to add to it, we're just going to tweak it, but we've accepted it. So that's what I think that they're saying. At the time of Esther and Mordechai, they were beginning to come into the next paradigm. It was the rabbinic paradigm, where, the famous story we get from the rabbinic side is that it's not in heaven. That's like the story that we hear from when God tells them, it's like one rabbi says like it's the law is like this, and the other rabbi says no, and then the voice from heaven comes and says like, no, the law is like Rabbi Eliezer, and the other rabbi gets up and says like, hold on, we don't listen to heavenly voices. It's not in heaven. You wrote that in the Torah. It's not in heaven. We decide. You gave us the authority. So that was a very big paradigm shift. Oh, Carol.
I'm not sure whether I'm off base here, but I saw a show last night called The Outsiders, which is very much a Romeo and Juliet theme. And at the end of the play, as in Romeo and Juliet, everybody has come together. The two houses have come together because they realize what damage they have done. And they have that moment of revelation. But we know, I just sat there looking at it last night, and I was so moved thinking, how long is that going to last? In the real world, how long is that going to last? So my thought about the Purim piece is that it teaches us that we have to keep reinventing it. We have to keep going back and doing it again and finding new ways to receive it.
Exactly. It's a living Torah. It's a tree of life. Trees are alive, and we'll talk about that more. In order to keep the Torah alive, we have to keep reinventing it. As you say, nothing stays the same. I always say, we always have in every synagogue you have like a ner tamid, like the ner tamid, the eternal life, the eternal light. I always think of it because when we say eternal light, we're thinking Greek. Eternal, when we say eternal, we often are thinking about Plato and eternal forms which don't change. But the word tamid, which we translate as eternal, tamid in Hebrew means constantly, constantly renewed. That's what tamid means when it says like ner tamid, la'alot ner tamid, bring up this candelabra. Tamid means constantly light this candle. And so that's a paradigm that we're in. It was like for the Jewish civilization, when we say eternal, we don't mean eternal, never changing. We need eternal, alive, and constantly renewed. That's what we're talking about. And so they're saying like the Torah, it was good for those first temple folks to be maybe a little bit like children. They were like handed on a silver platter. They got from the prophets, and it was very powerful. And we, on some level, we yearn for the power and the closeness that they had when a prophet could come down and when God could be revealed. We yearn for that. On the other hand, now we're a little bit more adult. Now it's been handed into our hands, and that's the rabbinic paradigm, where we study these texts and we figure out what God's intention is by looking at the Talmud and looking at the Midrash and looking at all these things. That's what the rabbis were saying. Now I want to come to another story, because Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapiro, the Piasetzna Rebbe, was an amazing Rebbe. He was the Rebbe in the Warsaw Ghetto and was martyred in the Holocaust, and was just an amazing Rebbe in the 20th century. And he was a mystic. He was from the Kabbalistic, Hasidic mystic tradition, and he had a different way of understanding what does it mean to hold the mountain over their heads. So I'm just kind of jumping into this. This was from almost exactly 100 years ago, from Shavuot, 1925. We say in the Passover Seder, if you had brought us to Mount Sinai, it would have been enough, Dayenu. How could merely arriving at Mount Sinai have been enough? It is because Mount Sinai itself manifested holiness, as will be the case for the whole world in the future. And the Israelites stood at Mount Sinai. The poison of the serpent disappeared from them, though this is another whole story with this poison of the serpent. But as they became they became as the first humans were in Gan Eden before eating of the tree of knowledge, seeing the unfiltered truth. So basically they're saying that this whole story about like when they ate the tree of knowledge, there was the poison of the serpent entered into them, and we lost that larger vision, that ability to see the truth, unfiltered. Anyway, so they were saying that poison disappeared in Mount Sinai, and they were once again, like in the Garden of Eden, once again able to see the unfiltered truth. That, what is the unfiltered truth? That there's holiness all around. Therefore, God covered, kafa alehem. It doesn't say lifted over them, but rather covered them. So again, he's making another interpretation, this time from a new paradigm, this time from a paradigm of mysticism that says, how can we understand kafa alehem har kagigit? It doesn't say lifted, it says covered them. Basically, they were surrounded by this mountain, like an overturned barrel surrounding them with the mountain. This was so that the world in its everyday manifestations wouldn't be surrounding them, and the Torah would only be a hidden treasure. That's what he's saying, our normal, everyday, conventional vision, where the Torah is just this hidden thing, and we just think of the world as the world. No, it would not be like that. Rather, all of them would be in the light. And now, after that, we need to pull that consciousness into ourselves, always. As if we are surrounded by the mountain. If the mountain symbolizes the world in a revealed holiness, which is there in the world, if we open our eyes, so that we are completely surrounded by holiness and our hearts are aflame with God consciousness. And if we can't, it gets a little realistic, and if we can't do this always, we should at least set aside regular times for this God awareness to manifest with us. He's like practical, he says, like, you got to make a practice of this. It's like we can open our eyes. This is like what I was like, not that I had big revelations, but like a little practice of davening every day, a little practice of writing a haiku or making a painting gets you into the present moment, or meditation can get you into the present moment and open your eyes to that hidden light that, in fact, wow, holiness is all around and in me. And God is not far away. And that's the practice of this revelation which is saying Gaia is alive, that the world itself can be a manifestation of Torah, can be a spark of God. This is, for many years, this was only the mystics talk about it. Now this is where we need to be. We need to be manifesting. We are all connected. We are all part of this. And this is the new paradigm that we're entering. So I have one more thing. That I wanted to do. Shameless self-promotion. This is another midrash that I refer to in the title of my book, which you can purchase outside there, called The Pearl and the Flame. And I love this midrash because it's about continuing revelation. And this is another way that we can get to that. So this is another story, and with this we'll end with this story. It starts off as a midrash, as a commentary on Song of Songs. So the love poem Song of Songs, one of the first, in the first chapter, it says, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with beads. And from that, the rabbi said, what do you mean your cheeks are lovely, your neck is beautiful with these beads? So they say, oh, neck, beads, what's going on? They tell this story. Ben Azai was sitting and expounding. He was learning Torah, and fire was surrounding him. And they went and they told Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, Ben Azai is sitting and expounding, and fire is burning around him. Rabbi Akiva went to him and said to him, I heard you were expounding and fire was burning around you. He said to Rabbi Akiva, yes. Rabbi Akiva said to him, perhaps you were engaged in the esoterica of the divine chariot. I said, perhaps you were, the Merkava. B'chadrei merkava hayita asuk. Maybe you were dealing with, so in those days, the deepest mysticism was called chariot mysticism, and it had to do with like visions of God and visions of the chariot of God and things. And it was said, actually, it's in another place, it's said that you're not allowed to teach this chariot mysticism except to only one person at a time, and that person has to know it already. So it was not, he was not even a rabbi yet. He shouldn't have been dealing. So he says, maybe you were dealing with this stuff. He says, no. But rather I was sitting and stringing together the words of Torah, and from the Torah to the prophets, and from the prophets to the writings. And the words were as joyful as when they were given at Sinai, and as sweet as when they were first given. At their primary giving of the Mount Sinai, where they're not given in fire, this is written, the mountain was burning with fire. So what is going on here? I love this midrash because he's studying Torah and there's fire all around him, which seems to be a kind of, he's in an altered state of consciousness. And they think that he's like doing this sort of like really esoteric mysticism. And when he answers, he says like, no. All I'm doing is I'm taking words of Torah from here, I'm taking them over Torah, and then I'm bringing them together in a new way. I'm going to take a word from Genesis, and I'm going to take another word from Isaiah. I'm going to put them together when they've never been put together that way. And what do you do when you make a new juxtaposition? What happens when you put something together in a new way? It's like when you're beading beads. So like, I like this color, I like this. Let's put this color together. When I put that purple together with that yellow, so there's something more that comes when they come together than when they were apart. Something new comes out when you put things together in a new way. And this is another way that the Torah stays eternal. Even if we didn't change any words of the Torah, when we can take one context, put it together with another context, like Ben Azai, we can have that fire of Mount Sinai. The revelation is meant to be going on all the time when we are dealing with the Torah and putting our context in and saying, let's bring my life into dialogue with the Torah. We are creating a new context. So we are invited, and we'll be doing this like for the rest of the weekend, looking at different texts, looking at different things, and putting our lives and our experiences together with this tradition, which was like another thing that Reb Zalman was very fond of saying was that we can make these innovations, but it has to be backwards compatible. Like, meaning to say that it's like we don't leave the tradition behind. We take the tradition and we put ourselves in dialogue into it, and therefore we build onto it like a new leaf on a tree. And so this is a little bit of just I know it's late, and so we wanted to just introduce this idea that the Torah is alive, it's here, it's always changing, and holiness is all around us, and ask ourselves, what is the revelation for right now? So any thoughts or questions? Otherwise, yeah.
Miriam.
I have to share this. I volunteer for the Aleph Shalom School, and I could be like their great-grandmother. When I was raising my children as preschoolers, I had all these little tricks of how to teach them to hold hands across the street. You don't do dangerous things in the kitchen, all this. I had it all worked out. Whereas last fall, we're in the kitchen making something, whatever it was for that holiday. And two girls were playing and they pushed each other, and I didn't do my kindness thing. I did my sort of reaction. And then we talked about how important it was to not run around in the kitchen and everything. But just yesterday, they got very active and they started running through the kitchen, and I got my anger up again. And one of the girls says, I don't remember anything about that. You know, really snotty. And the, and the other one said, oh, really? You know, as if nothing had been said before, and they hadn't talked about it in class or anything. Whereas I thought about it, and I was talking to Rabbi Karen about it, and she said, well, that's why we're a new day. We think it through a different way. So I asked one of the girls, the third girl, I said, you know, I made a mistake yesterday about the kitchen. You know how dangerous it is and everything. And all these kids are very clever. So I had not tapped their cleverness before. What I did is that, why can't we run in the kitchen? And she made a poster. It's a Torah teaching. Because I forgot, you know, it's like from the beginning we could have done that. Mm-hmm. But no, it's 6 months later. But still we're doing it. So you all have to go see the sign outside the kitchen. It is adorable. So anyway, I had, what? Kitchen. But it's like, duh, when you think about it, but it's the same thing. It's like, no, you're not supposed to kill. But yet I do all sorts of actions that I kill these kids' initiative.
Right. Beautiful. No, that's beautiful. And to me, it brings up one of the things, because it's like, you say like, why didn't I think of this? You know, it's like when we're in a situation and we get like feedback, that's the aliveness of emotion. It's like when we get feedback from others, and then it's not like just me thinking in my head, but it's like me and the kids and the classroom and the experience from yesterday, and all of that comes together, and it's like something new emerges. Yeah. And that's how we learn. And that's really the key, because it's like, it's the same thing we started out with, like, oh, right, our bodies are connected by the fascia, and the trees are connected to the water, and like, oh, right, we learn by letting things come together and influence each other and create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. That's how aliveness happens. That's how revelation and learning always happens.
I just want to comment on your story, because it's the same as when revelation first came, the mountain had to be over their head and there was fire. So you were appropriate. First you were the mountain over their head and fire, and then the paradigm shift was like, oh, we can take it. So not to beat yourself up, you're in tradition. Anybody want this?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
Thank you for that discussion. I think that this paradigm shift concept, and we're talking about it here in terms of spiritual shift and how we can learn from our tradition and keep it alive because of what we contribute to it. And it just keeps happening in my life on a personal level is that I keep advocating for a paradigm shift, you know, and I think that the thing is that this idea is about everything that happens in the world, along with the connectedness idea that, you know, in my work, I've been fighting for paradigm shift. You know, people that are just finding it remarkable that fascia exists, you know, that's old news, ancient news, right? But it's the same process of recognizing and then collaborating, and it's all the same thing. It's like the levels upon the levels, and the bringing in nature, for example. That's how you heal. If you don't include nature in your healing paradigm, you ain't gonna get anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, same with creative expressive arts and haikus. If that's not part of your life and what we encourage in each other, we will be stuck. We'll be under the mountain.
Right.
You know?
Right. And part of this is all, you know, one of the things that's you know, that's really important to me that I discovered was that, like, the way that these texts work, the way that like these words are connected to those words, at some point about 20 years ago, I realized like, oh, that's the same way an ecosystem is connected.
Exactly.
And that's the paradigm shift that we've been going through. That this, it's the, we'll talk about this whole weekend, but it's just like it's reminding me of this big paradigm shift that happened in 1997. She was a graduate student at British Columbia. No, she was actually from British Columbia. But so Suzanne Simard. Anybody know who Suzanne Simard is? We should know Suzanne Simard, kind of like Charles Darwin. I'm hoping in like 50 years we will. So Suzanne Simard, as a graduate student, published a paper that was like accepted for the journal Nature, which is like the big scientific journal, and was put on the cover of Nature. And it was where she was proving that trees, through the mycorrhizal fungi, are like sending nutrients to one another and information to one another, whereas before everybody assumed that trees are just competing with each other. And it took years, it took her whole career before, it's like people started to believe that this was actually true. But again, this was the paradigm shift that in fact trees thrive not when they just compete with one another, but they thrive because they're a forest. And the forest is a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And
Right.
we find that in trees, we find that in society, we find that in our bodies, all of these different levels. And that's why I say we still read about this like, oh, you're still surprised at this, because it takes years for these kind of paradigm shifts to really sink in. And that's the work. And how do we actually really, even with us, in our own consciousness, how can we let this sink in even deeper? And that's another level, because it's like one of the sort of, like Gregory Bateson had the parable that he liked to talk about. What if you have like somebody who's blind and they have a stick that they use, they have a cane. And so where is the border of that person? Right? Is the person just their body, or is that stick part of the person because it's part of their sensory apparatus? And that's on some level, that's the question that is being brought up by the fact that like these trees couldn't survive if it wasn't for the fungi. So where's the end of the tree and where is it's like they're two different things, but they're connected in this intimate way. And so for us to start to feel that in our bodies, that like, yes, okay, I am an individual and I am way beyond myself. I could not survive if I was just isolated by myself.
I think one of the most important examples of this is that there has been a tradition of this idea of the survival of the fittest and this competition. And people have not been talking about in these years about altruism and about doing for others, and that's also very human. It's not just about the competition. And I think that there has been this, again, individualist idea, and we didn't understand that trees are connected, and we have honored individualism and devalued the alternative in certain cultures.
Exactly. No, for sure. And also,
it's such a critical time now to be thinking that way, because we are and have the capacity for all these things, but it's been suppressed almost by,
for sure. For sure, it's suppressed, and this is. It's not been part of the paradigm. It's not been part of our education system.
It's not. It's amazing.
All of those things.
Also, I just learned something a couple of days ago where people were talking about how the trees support each other, and not only are they sharing nutrients, but they can generously send nutrients to the tree that needs.
Yes, exactly.
The
Exactly, and even and what really surprised them was like even in not their own species. And even so and and they'll send communications. If one is being attacked by, by an insect or pathogen, they'll send through the air chemical signals to let other trees know about it.
Yeah,
There's
so we
all sorts
have
of
to learn.
amazing.
We have
amazing
to
things
learn from the
going on.
trees.
So yeah, so
Really learn.
Suzanne Simard should be up there with Darwin. Another one is. I'm going to say, well, that's part of it. Another, Lynn Margolis, Margulis, Margolis. I'm not exactly how to sure, but anyway, so Lynn Margolis was another groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting biologist who discovered that the mitochondria in our cell used to be not part of us, for all animals, everything that has a mitochondria. This was an example of something that had come out and had been another organism and then like entered into the cells, and they said, oh, this is useful. This is a nice symbiosis. Let's do this. And that is another part of a big paradigm shift. It says that like we could be actually evolving, not because we're always competing, but we could be evolving because we start to actually work together. And those are the kind of paradigm shifts that it's interesting that these are two women that were doing this. So we're going to talk about this tomorrow when we read the book of Ruth. Maybe we'll read the book of Ruth, but so we're going to talk about some of that, how that's dealt with in the Torah, about women changing the story. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. I just also want to observe that like after I stopped talking and I let you talk, the energy got so much better because it became a conversation and things emerged in an alive kind of way. And that's what we're talking about, because it's like when we let things emerge from something, then things that we could never have imagined emerge from something new when people put their thoughts together, puts their minds together, and we become a group that's more than the sum of our parts. So let's continue with this for the rest of the weekend. Chag Sameach.
Thank you so much, Reb Natan. Amazing. So we have a lot to look forward to. Reb Natan will be teaching us again tomorrow evening during our services, and then on Saturday, be doing a drash during services. Then we'll have a lunch together on Saturday afternoon, and then, weather permitting, we'll be outside, actually, in nature and learning with the trees.
Beautiful.
I was hoping that I would find a ride home. I don't care what time. Oh, they don't have to know, but they can. They're welcome. If they want to come and get me.
Kingston.
I'm in Kingston. That's okay with you?
Or you could sleep on my couch.
Wait. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Reb Natan. I'm going to keep this train going on the station, so we're going to have an interlude of an Ana B'Koach practice. But of course, Ana B'Koach, we are asking Tatir Tzerura, we are asking for the one to untie our tangles. So just to get into it, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up, take a nice good stretch, and I'm actually going to be teaching from the floor because it's getting to that point in the night. We have some cushions over there if anyone wants. The nigun that we're going to sing these words to is Could you start passing these around for me? Thank you. Hey, hey, if you want, you can join me on the floor. Amazing. Are the song sheets, does anyone have the full stack? Do we have some, can we share over here? Do we have any extras? Oh, thank you, Reb Natan. So Reb Natan taught us so beautifully about so many things and started off talking about counting the Omer and how there are many different ways to engage with counting the Omer. And I've shared with all of you this incredible, truly this is a gift from one of our teachers at Aleph, Rabbi Elliot Ginsberg. And he shared with me this ancient mystical practice from Tzfat of counting the Omer through the text of Ana B'Koach, which is a mystical poem which is said to be the 42-word name of God. So 42 letter, thank you so much. Teachers all around. Okay, so this was my first time moving through this practice. This is how I counted the Omer this year, and it was really just a gorgeous experience. So I wanted to share this with all of you, and we are counting. Oh, here, there's one more. And this is a gift, really. Save it for next year, because if you get into it, because it really was a powerful way. And he created it using Zalman's color coding of the Sefirot. Each Sefirah is attached to a different word of Ana B'Koach. And we're singing it with this nigun that I found online, that Rabbi David Seidenberg, maybe some of you know him, Seidenberg, thank you. He learned it from Reb Zalman, who says that Shlomo taught it to him, saying that it was a Hasidic nigun. Okay, so we're gonna move. This chart is just fantastic. So we're going to be moving through the Hebrew column, which is the third column, but we'll move nice and slowly. And as you sing each word, you can take in the translation of that word, and this poem is really just so powerful. So we'll nigun it one more time. And in between each phrase, we do a good. Okay, let's begin on the first page. Ana b'koach gedulat yemincha tatir tzirua yai kabel rinat amecha sagveinu tahoreinu nora Hinina, hina, 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 hina. Next page. Na gibor dorshei yichudcha kevavat shomerei Hinina, hina, 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 hina. Barim taharim Rachameim tzikatcha tamid gomelem Yinina, hina, 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 hina Chasin kadosh berov tuvcha Nahel adetcha Yinina, hina, 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 hina Yachid ge'er le'amcha penei Zochre kedushatcha Yinina, hina, 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 hina Shavatenu kabel Ushmat sa'aktenu Yodea ta'alumot Yinina, hina, 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 hina. And having said the whole name out loud, we sing Baruch Shem Kivod Malechuto Leolam Vaed Yinina, hina, 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 hina Baruch Shem Kivod Malechuto Leolam Vaed Yinina, hina, 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 hina Through time and space, through time and space, your glory shines, your glory shines, majestic one, majestic one. Hina, 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 hina. Through time and space, your glory shines, majestic one. Hina, 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 hina.